Ho, ho, Merry Christmas. Yes. How y'all doing there? Welcome, Pi Padre, wishing you and yours a very merry. Quite contrary. Okay, well, this is my little Christmas video to you all. So to all, I wish you a very happy and healthy and holy and wonderful and fun Christmas, okay? Okay, so I was gonna use this one here. It's a little more Santa looking. A little more Santa looking, yeah. There we go. Anyway, clay pipe. It's the only thing I got that, other than a Bacchus pipe that kind of looks a little bit like a drunken Santa. And it does seem like we have entered into, we've turned a page. Historically, I think, let me get the old church warden going. And of course, I'm in my church warden. I am smoking some seasonal favorite Christmas cookie, very appropriately enough. Got a little bit of coffee here, some hazelnut cream in my my Zephyr Cove Lake Tahoe coffee cup. And so, get that pipe going. Yeah, okay, so Merry Christmas to all of you. And so tonight I'm wishing you my annual Christmas greetings. So again, to you and yours, a very happy and holy and Merry Christmas, fun Christmas. Enjoy wherever you are at. Hopefully you're able to have a pipe and enjoy that as well. I'm getting over another cold. This is like the third cold I've had. About a month and a half I've had lots of different little maladies. So I'm trying to come out of this one. Maybe a little bit of pipe smoke might chase it away. I don't know. Good old J.M. Boswell's Christmas cookie. Okay. Well, I do hope you're enjoying the holiday season, if you want to call it that, holy season. And but I did want to take this opportunity to kind of well, like I said, I was talking about kind of turning new pages, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of maybe talk about is this is my annual Christmas video. I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of turn the page, venture out into some new territory tonight. Some of this will be kind of different from my usual fare, my rantings and my ramblings. But tonight, I want to just say that, I want to introduce this video. It's kind of my, okay, how do I start this? Let me find a way to kind of start this here. Okay, so as it is the holiday season, and a lot of us, I guess a lot of us, maybe some of us, maybe some more than others, we have our traditional holiday, there's the camera right there. We have our traditional holiday things that we do, in addition to trimming the tree and, maybe making fruitcake. I've actually done that, did I make some fruitcake a number of years ago? Let me just tell you that was an interesting experience, and it was something that probably was not a very good thing for yours truly. But making fruitcake or trimming the tree or, doing Christmas cards. Yep. It's officially Christmas. I got the Gap Christmas card. Don't know if you're on the Gap's mailing list, but This signifies a real Christmas, and you get a Gap Christmas card, an old Gary Portier Christmas card. Okay, so thank you, Gary. Wanted to give you a little shout out there for that. Thank you. So I always look forward to his creative Christmas cards. Gary's creative Christmas cards. Ooh, there's a little business name there for you. Yeah. Okay. Gary's creative Christmas cards. Oh. All right. So, but that kind of got the old kind of melted my Scrooge's heart, and thought I'd go ahead and start making some Christmas videos, even though I'm not feeling all that ho-ho-ho-y. Okay, so this whole video that I'm about to share with you, it's going to be maybe a little bit, it'd probably be as long as my normal ones, but it's going to be different. Because why? Because I'm going to be talking about a very, 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 very special Christmas movie. Yep. Now, it's going to be a stretch, folks, but here we go. About 6 months ago, I started noticing in my queue, don't ask me why, but a lot of people were talking and commenting about what I would like to submit to you. Let me just start off my little beginning of this video. I would like to say that I want to introduce a Christmas movie that a lot of people probably don't think of as a Christmas movie. Now, a lot of us, when we think about Christmas movies, I mean, my all-time favorite has been, always will be, is It's a Wonderful Life, okay? And right next to that probably is all the different versions of A Christmas Carol, okay? And then I like The Santa Claus with Tim Burton. Let's see what other Christmas movies I'm thinking of. Polar Express, I like that one. That's a really heartwarming movie. Fun animation. Even the Jim Carrey animation of Christmas Carol is not bad. It's good. Let's see, Miracle on 34th Street. I don't really watch that quite a lot, but I have in the past. But it's not. Excuse me. It's not an annual favorite. White Christmas, I used to love watching that quite a bit. Bells of St. Mary's, that's kind of a Christmas movie. Yeah, and I know some of you are already going to sit there and tell me that, Die Hard, is a Christmas movie. All right, fine, it's a Christmas movie. You want it to be a Christmas movie, then Die Hard with Bruce Willis, that's a Christmas movie. But here's my new entry for Christmas movies. Now, and again, this comes about, let me just go ahead and fill in the blank. What I'd like to introduce to you tonight in this video is why I'm going to try to give reasons why I think that The Shining is a Christmas movie. Okay. Now, if I've got your attention, or if you think this guy's been smoking too much whatever, then, you're welcome to go and watch something else. But if you want to stay and hear my reason for saying that The Shining, by Stanley Kubrick's movie The Shining, is a Christmas movie, then you're in the right place, okay? Now, this all came about, again, about 6 months ago. I've always been intrigued by Stanley Kubrick movies, and so let me, mise en scène, set the scene here for what you're about to see. Now, again, most people would never, ever think of The Shining as a Christmas movie. I mean, I don't even think it has a Christmas tree in there. There's no Christmas songs. There's nothing really Christmassy, quote unquote, about The Shining. But I'm going to try to, enlighten you and share with you my interpretation, okay, and why I think it's a Christmas movie. Now, again, like I said, this all started about maybe 6 months ago, and I have to tell you, I never saw. I was aware of The Shining. Knew that it was at one time back, I think it was 1979, 1980, came out. Anyway, long story short, everybody said it was a horror movie. And I just, when I think of horror movies, I think of either really spooky, supernatural movies or the slasher ones. And to me, A Shining was just kind of like, I don't want to say amateur, but, Jack Nicholson chopping down a bathroom door with an axe was like, well, don't ask me why. Why that didn't why I thought that was a horror movie. You know, it was just like, it was kind of like, to be honest with you, it was almost like kind of, I grew up with that kind of stuff. So it's not like, you know, it's like, yeah, you know, whatever. You know, that was kind of just a regular weekend at my house, you know. A little bit more true than you'll understand, but I'm not going to go into all those details. But anyway, the bottom line was that it was just maybe a little too close to real life for me, and seeing crazy people do crazy things in my life, and me doing crazy things in my life. It was just like, you know what? You know, it just didn't appeal to me. It was just like, that's not really what I consider a horror movie. Maybe a domestic violence movie, perhaps. You know, psychological thriller, maybe. But and I never watched it. I just never watched The Shining. So, but I'm always intrigued by people giving really interesting critiques about, you know, classic movies. There's been a couple of really excellent videos on the interpretation of Psycho. You know, that was one of the most scariest movies that I saw growing up. Psycho was really psychological. It scared the, you know, it scared you. I mean, it really did. So anyway, so finally, after listening to some people's interesting commentaries about The Shining and their interpretations of The Shining, got me intrigued. I kind of like, well, I said, well, you know what? I've got to watch this. Now, I love Stanley Kubrick's 2001. That was the first Stanley Kubrick film I saw, I was about 8 years old, and it just totally captivated me. I was like mesmerized from beginning to end. And even though I was like, what did I just watch? 2001. And, I never really kind of gave it more than like, well, this is a really deep movie. It's about basically how we've evolved or changed over the millennia, from, bipedal, primitive peoples to, now, going to the horizons of the future in space, space travel, space exploration, the exploration of humanity. It's like, okay, that's probably the deeper level of, we're not just going to the furthest, remotest parts of the universe, but we're even now delving into the deeper meanings of what it means to be a human being. I thought, well, okay, I think I kind of understand some of it, but it was like, okay, but it was just mostly a really interesting odyssey, literally, 2001. And then a few years later, when I was growing up, and I went through Uncle Sam's Misguided School for Children, USMC, United States Marine Corps, and a few years after I went through that wonderful experience, and I saw, Full Metal Jacket. And to this day, I don't know how he did it. Well, I do know how he did it. His secret for the authenticity of that movie was Gunnery Sergeant R. Lee Ermey. Okay? And because he was a real Marine Corps drill instructor, so if he had somebody who wrote a book about boot camp, Marine boot camp, it probably wouldn't have come off nearly as authentic. But, I mean, I wore that pickle suit. I had real drill instructors that talked to me just like that, real drill instructors that punched me out and choked me and the whole bit. That was all real. When I saw that, did I have flashbacks? Not like I'm traumatized, but it was like, oh my gosh, I'm watching what I went through 20 years ago or 13, 15 years ago. I forgot how old I was when I watched it. I think I was in college. I went through Marine Corps recruit training when I was 17, ran away, and instead of joining the circus, I joined Uncle Sam's Misguided Children. And I think I was I was probably 25. Was I 25? Yeah, I was about 25 when I saw that movie for the first time. Yeah. So that's what? Do the math, that's 8 years later. So, I had that experience still relatively fresh in my mind. I mean, it's like, oh, I remember that. So when I knew it was a Stanley Kubrick film, I thought, my goodness, that's really how did he do that? It's like, how did you make that so real? You know, and other films that he did. Let's see. I guess Dr. Strangelove. I haven't watched that one all the way through. But again, he just Clockwork Orange. I haven't seen that one. But anyway, the bottom line is that many of his films just have these, really profound, messages. And except for Barry Lyndon, everyone says it's boring, and it is. Okay. But I mean, if you like period pieces, costume pieces, I guess it's okay. I guess like Ryan O'Neal from The Love Story, I guess that was his last big movie, and then he fell off into obscurity. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, so I've been watching all these people talking about the interpretation of The Shining. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll just go ahead and, watch it once and see what it's all about. Well, this is where this video begins to take a turn as we now delve into the mystery of The Shining. And my interpretation or my take on it is, in many ways, I think it is a Christmas movie. And I guess I'll go ahead and say the beginning, and then we'll delve into the movie itself. How's that for the review? But the reason why I think it's a Christmas movie is because of this. In recent years, we've been seeing what they call the advent of the anti-Santa Claus. Movies like, Violent Night, I guess that's a new one out. Krampus, which came out about, 2015, maybe 2017, maybe. Again, kind of an anti-Santa Claus type movie. Holy Night, Bloody Night, or something like that. Just a lot of Christmas movies. Even Mel Gibson had one a couple years ago, which I thought was really bizarre but very interesting, called Fat Man or The Fat Man. I kind of look a little bit like Mel in that movie. I think a little bit. Yeah. And it's bizarre. It's just, if you've never seen it, it's just a bizarre movie. But it's kind of this kind of, it's taking the Santa Claus character, instead of making him jolly and ho, 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 and, fun like Tim Burton and all those other holiday family films, it's dark. It has a sinister, kind of this dark thing about it. It's like, whoa, we got really dark really fast, didn't we? And so I started thinking about The Shining, and I started thinking, and the thing that kind of triggered me to make an entry about how I interpret The Shining and how I see it is simply this. One guy, there's lots of videos out there. There's probably thousands of them now. But the more notable ones, a guy named Rob Agar, I guess, he's done a lot of work on these videos and other videos, and he just does these scholarly treatises. But anyway, one other guy, and I forgot his name, and it doesn't probably matter that much anyway, but he kind of says, well, there are no ghosts in The Shining. And after I watched it, and I went going, what do you mean there are no ghosts? There's at least 3 ghosts. And then all of a sudden, I said, yeah, that's right. There are 3 ghosts in that movie. And what other very famous work of literature has 3 ghosts that show up as these very memorable and poignant characters in the story? And I started kind of playing with it. I said, well, could it be that this is, instead of an anti-Santa Claus or a negative Santa Claus movie, it is kind of the anti-Christmas Carol movie? And I would even submit to you that it's probably even has and I'll explain that a little bit in a minute here, it even has a little kind of a twist or a diversion into kind of an It's a Wonderful Life movie. So anyway, so let me kind of back up and kind of start the intro to the actual film review, and let's talk about The Shining as a great new classic Christmas holiday movie. Words of wisdom, Lloyd. Words of wisdom. Okay. So as I set the mise en scène, basically I'd like to submit that The Shining is, believe it or not, a great Christmas movie, and here's why. I believe that in many ways The Shining is a modern-day retelling of A Christmas Carol, be it a little bit more sinister. And I would like to prove to you that in many ways The Shining is a modern-day reflection of A Christmas Carol. So it seems that trying to give a plausible interpretation of Stanley Kubrick's movie The Shining is something that a lot of people have taken upon themselves to try to figure out all of the esoteric pieces of Kubrick's filmography. So here's my little foray, my feeble attempt into giving a new take on interpreting Stanley Kubrick's the movie The Shining. It's kind of like the armchair detectives who take it upon themselves to try to solve cold cases in the comfort and confines of their own living rooms. One notable person comes to mind is the late Michelle McNamara, who began investigating the string of rapes and murders that took place in California back in the 70s and 80s, and published a book called Gone in the Night. So as many people try to take on the hobby of analyzing Kubrick's films, it turns very quickly into an obsession, a consuming compulsion, not unlike what happens to the character of Jack in The Shining. So my first premise is that The Shining is, believe it or not, a Christmas movie. So let me explain. In recent years, the Christmas genre has been infiltrated by what I would like to call the advent of anti-Santa Claus type movies. Movies like Krampus, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Violent Night, in this recent year, as well as a few more, have made their way onto the big screen. Now, before I share with you my scintillating observations on this classic horror movie, let me share with you some notable interpretations of The Shining from the documentary Room 237. Now, this is just a cursory overview of some of the basic interpretations that some people have had over the years regarding The Shining. One, a lot of people will see The Shining as Kubrick's very esoteric way of looking at the plight of American Indians. Another person points to elements in the film that he believes Kubrick is trying to invoke memories of the Holocaust. There's even another interpretation that says that in many ways The Shining was kind of a model for NASA to fake the moon landings back in the 60s and 70s. And in fact, they even go so far as to say that Stanley Kubrick actually filmed the false moon landings. 4, there's a subliminal imagery for selling products. And then the 5th one, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at it, is being able to play the movie The Shining simultaneously forwards and backwards. And you can do that in a lot of modern film editing software, and it's quite interesting to see how the scenes from the beginning and the end of the movie and other parts of the movie kind of line up and kind of almost they make kind of like a collage of meaning. You see certain things that you normally wouldn't see when you overlap the two films playing simultaneously together, but one starting at the front and one starting at the back. All right, so after watching many videos about the interpretation of The Shining, most notably the work of Rob Agar from the Collective Learning Channel, who has done an absolute scholarly treatise on on The Shining and other Kubrick films, in addition to a few other people who've offered their interpretations, it kind of dawned on me that there's another interpretation that doesn't seem to readily occur to most people, probably because it doesn't perfectly fit what other people are trying to say about this enigmatic movie. And it is actually that the Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining is his version, I believe, of A Christmas Carol. Now, one thing I would like to say real quick, and this is I'm interjecting here from my script, is that Kubrick lived for 30 years in England, and he was well-read, and I have to say that he was no stranger to Charles Dickens and The Christmas Carol. So my take on The Shining is simply that it is kind of an anti-Christmas Carol type movie. In addition to that, I would also like to interject here too that it also seems to be an anti-It's a Wonderful Life movie as well, but I'll talk about that more later. So this all came about when one of the videos I saw very vociferously declared that there are no ghosts in The Shining. And so I started thinking about that, and I began to say, well, wait a minute. No, actually there are 3 major ghosts, and once I recognized this literary fact, then it was a very small step for me to see The Shining as an interpretation, a modern-day interpretation of A Christmas Carol, or if you will, an anti-Christmas Carol adaptation. So upon further reflection, this interpretation kind of seems to fall into place for me. So let me go on and try to explain a little bit more about how I see The Shining as, in many ways, a modern-day Stanley Kubrick version of A Christmas Carol. Or more notably, as I'd like to see it, as an anti-Christmas Carol movie. All Jack and no work makes Jack a killboy. Let's look at the opening scene. In many ways, the opening scene is beautiful, picturesque, majestic even, but yet a very enigmatic scene of this beautiful lake with the mountains surrounding it. Now, Kubrick loved to emphasize lots of reflections in his movie, and of course, The Shining is without a doubt the most notable one of lots of shining reflections. Not just cinematographically, not just cinematically, but within the whole storyline and the direction of the movie, there's a lot of mirroring going on. And so for me, when I look at this beautiful opening scene, what I really see is Kubrick subtly saying, what you are about to see is going to be a reflection of something deeper, something more profound. Kubrick is going to be reflecting in many ways what I think is the modern day version of the story of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Now, comparing the characters of The Shining with the characters in The Christmas Carol. Of course, Jack Torrance is without a doubt Scrooge. But he is Scrooge that does not accept redemption. And he is, again, kind of the anti-Christmas Carol movie. Instead of repenting and turning his life around and allowing the message of Christmas to soften his heart and bring about a true conversion, our Scrooge in The Shining does just the opposite. He's literally the polar opposite of Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. This next character that I'd like to look at a little bit more closely is Stuart Ullman. And Stuart Ullman, for me, believe it or not, I see as a one-to-one correspondent with Scrooge's nephew, Fred. And here's why. In this Christmas Carol, Fred is one of the early characters that kind of set up the character arc for Scrooge. He basically invites him to Christmas dinner and tells him the door is always open and he will always keep Christmas in his heart, and nothing that Scrooge can say will ever, tarnish or deter him in his Christmas spirit. And so Jack Torrance, and so we see this character arc of Scrooge kind of being in some ways prophetically uttered by nephew Fred by basically saying, hey, Uncle Scrooge, you are always welcome to Christmas. When you find it in your heart, you will always find a place at our home for you. And so he kind of tells this prophetic arc for Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. Well, Jack Torrance kind of tells, Stuart Ullman kind of sets up the character arc for Jack Torrance, the modern day Scrooge, by telling him this very grisly story about this old caretaker, Grady, who was overcome by cabin fever and murdered his family. And so again, it kind of foretells, it's a foreshadowing of what will end, what will basically be the culmination of Jack Torrance, the modern day Scrooge. So Stuart Ullman kind of takes that place of Nephew Fred. Of course, little Danny is our Tiny Tim. In many ways, it's kind of obvious that Tiny Tim, he's the Tiny Tim one-to-one correspondent. Now, Wendy is, even though she's Jack's wife in The Shining, I think that she actually corresponds to Bob Cratchit, because Bob Cratchit is the one who is put upon and put down and belittled and demeaned by Scrooge. And Jack does an awful lot of the same things to Wendy that Scrooge does to Bob Cratchit. Also, and this might get a little too much into the weeds for now, but I'll also say that also the character Mr. Halloran kind of also is if you kind of combine the two characters of Wendy and Halloran, they kind of make up the Bob Cratchit character. So now this gets me to where I finally came up with this idea of The Shining being a Christmas movie. The first ghost that we encounter is Lloyd. Words of wisdom, Lloyd. Words of wisdom. And Lloyd is an interesting character because a lot of people would say, well, how can you say Lloyd is like the ghost of a ghost in the movie, in the story? How can you say Lloyd is the ghost? How can you say that Lloyd is a ghost of the Christmas Carol? Well, let me explain that. Now, the ghost in A Christmas Carol, the first ghost, is the ghost of Christmas past. And in many ways, Lloyd is this ghost that helps Jack, or at least opens the door for Jack to explore his painful past with his family. And in many ways, the ghost of Christmas past does this with Scrooge. The ghost shows Scrooge his childhood, his growing up years, his years as a young apprentice with Fozziwig, his young years of his courtship and falling out with the woman that he loves, and all this pain and sadness. And so in many ways, when Jack is talking to Lloyd, what he does is it begins to open up and talk about the problems in his marriage, the problems that are hurting Danny. And so in many ways, I saw that this first ghost, Lloyd, is really kind of representative of the ghost of Christmas past. Now, I want to say one thing here. This is interesting. In the movie The Shining, Stuart Ullman, as he's showing the family around, they come into the gold room, and you notice that this bar, as beautiful as it is, lit up. It's a shining bar, but there's no booze there. And I think that's really, really important to note, because in a lot of ways, a lot of times people will say, well, Jack slipped and he started drinking again. But the problem is that there's no booze. Now, somebody said, well, maybe he brought a bottle with him and then hid it in a suitcase. I think that's really a stretch. Being a person that's, an old alumni of John Barleycorn, it doesn't quite work that way. He was basically, they set it up to say that there's no booze there, period. So what's really happening in this story is not alcohol related. Now, yeah, Jack wants a drink, and all of a sudden this ghostly figure appears, and when you see now when Lloyd's standing there, the thing is just chock full. It's chock-a-block of booze. But in reality, there is no booze. So Jack doesn't really have a slip and go on a bender because there's just nothing there to drink. Okay? So what that leads me to say simply is that it's not alcoholically induced that he's seeing these characters. I think that these characters are intentional. They're not, because a lot of people want to try to always rationalize and say it's all natural. You can explain it like this and this. And again, I'm not saying anybody who's offered other interpretations is wrong and they don't know what they're talking about. I'm just saying that this is my interpretation based upon, the things that I've seen in the movie. So Lloyd is that he represents the ghost of Christmas past. Now, the second ghost, and if you've seen the movie, you know that the second ghost is in room 237? Yeah, 237. And so it's again, I can't probably show a whole lot because it's the ghost is a naked lady, basically. Okay, it's a naked lady. It's very salacious in the beginning. She's sitting in this tub, and then she kind of draws back the curtain, and voila, there she is in all of her feminine charms, and she moves over, steps out of the tub, and goes over and embraces Jack, and they have this little romantic little thing, and then all of a sudden, when he opens his eyes, the beautiful woman turns into a hag or a crone, or with bed sores, and she's really decrepit, and you're probably saying, well, how in the world can you say that is the ghost of Christmas present? The second ghost in the Christmas Carol. Well, again, you go in, you gotta look at the imagery here. So in the Christmas Carol, this curtain is drawn back and it reveals this glorious, light of this beautiful scene where there's wine and food and all these, sensual pleasures, things that, we kind of sometimes associate with feasting and celebrating and enjoying life, right? And so, you walk in, Scrooge walks into the second ghost, a Christmas present, and he's sitting on this chair. Come in and know me better, man, Well, in many ways, she's sitting in a tub, kind of saying, come in and know me better, man. Can you see what I'm saying there? And got to keep it G rating. It's a family show here. But anyway, then in a Christmas present, yes, he shows Scrooge all these delectable things about Christmas and how, sumptuous and scrumptious and delicious Christmas can be. But then at the end, the ghost of Christmas present turns into this old, gnarled, withered old man, kind of like me. And at the end, there shows these little, Scrooge goes, is that a claw that I see underneath your robe, and he opens the robe and he shows these ghastly little creatures, and he says, this boy is ignorance and this girl is want, but beware of the boy, and basically it's this horrible premonition. It's like, oh my gosh, I thought Christmas present was fun and beautiful, and now it turns out to be this ugly reality that is basically made ugly by man's sin and stingy heart. So when I think of that second ghost in The Shining, you open the door and here's this wonderful, beautiful woman, and she's inviting and evocative of pleasure, and wow, and then all of a sudden, she turns from this beautiful woman into this ugly old hag. And it's very reminiscent of what happens in A Christmas Carol. So that's why I say the ghost number 2 in A Shining is the woman in room 237. Now, the third and final ghost is seen again in the Golden Room when Jack goes back into the bar and, he has another drink and talks to Lloyd. And then this time, he is introduced to what I would call the third and final ghost, the ghost of Delbert Grady, or Charles Grady, or Grady. And basically, Grady has this really bizarre, kind of interaction with him. It's kind of strange. And essentially, basically, he kind of points Jack to this, you say that I was the caretaker and murdered my family. No, you've always been the caretaker, and now you're going to have to murder your family. In other words, the ghost of Christmas future, the ghost yet to come, basically shows Scrooge that this is the path you've been on, and this is where it all leads, basically to the grave. And so, of course, we know in the Christmas Carol that Scrooge is overcome by his sense of, guilt and stinginess and greed, and he repents. He changes. He has a conversion. But Delbert Grady, as he kind of literally, and it's interesting because he's all these figures. Usually in A Christmas Carol, they're all robed in black, and Delbert Grady is all in black. And basically, he gives you that, it's that way. That's the way you're headed. And basically, that's what happens to Jack. And he is now set on his final course of destroying his family, his life, and his very self. Now, one of the other things about the Stanley Kubrick genre of films is in many ways that a lot of his films, or what I'd like to call, they're bifurcated. In other words, they're like two films in one. For example, when you look at one of my favorite Kubrick films of 2001: A Space Odyssey, it starts off with this prehistoric scenario, and then later the movie changes into the space story. And actually, you would say, well, it even changes a third time by taking you into like this third dimension. Other famous Kubrick films do this, like Full Metal Jacket. We start off in Marine Corps boot camp, Parris Island, South Carolina, and then we move abruptly after the private pilot scene to Vietnam. So the reason why I bring this up is because in some ways The Shining is kind of like this as well. So even though I'd like to say that this movie is Stanley Kubrick's version of A Christmas Carol, albeit an anti-Christmas Carol movie, it can also be seen as an anti-It's a Wonderful Life movie as well. If I completely lost you, then let me back up here and try to explain. So as I said, I think that in many ways, you can interpret this movie as kind of like an anti-Christmas Carol movie. In other words, it has a lot of the components of A Christmas Carol, but the reason why I say it's an anti-Christmas Carol movie is because instead of Ebenezer Scrooge being converted to becoming a good and charitable person, the character of Jack, which is clearly our Scrooge, goes deeper into his darker side. All Jack and no work makes Jack a killboy. So instead of Scrooge becoming converted to see the light and becoming a better version of himself, a more compassionate person, Jack in this anti-Christmas Carol movie goes deeper into his darkness and allows that darkness to finally overcome him and push him into his murderous rage. But the movie, The Shining, then departs. And the rest of the movie is played out in this frozen maze at night. Now, this is where I see this movie becoming bifurcated. We have, on one hand, it's kind of Kubrick's version of A Christmas Carol, but now it seems to, again, shift to this dramatic scene, and it's this nighttime scene of where Jack is chasing his family through this wintry maze. And in many ways, it's reminiscent, if you've ever seen A Wonderful Life, where George Bailey, in his depression, goes out in the middle of a snowstorm to potentially commit suicide. He's stopped, of course, by the good angel Clarence, and he is given this gift of seeing what the world would be like without him. And this all takes place at nighttime, in a nighttime scene where he's lost and nobody knows him, until he comes back to his senses and he regains his real life at the bridge in the moment of a snowfall at night. And we see the conclusion of The Shining taking place during a snowstorm at night in this maze. So in many ways, it's kind of not only an anti-Christmas Carol movie, but it's also kind of an anti-It's a Wonderful Life version movie as well. Now, a few things that I would like to maybe clear up. The elevator of blood and the two twins. So first, I have to say that the elevator of blood was something I wasn't quite sure of, but then later, upon further reflection, I think that the elevator of blood even fits in to my interpretation of The Shining as a anti-Christmas Carol movie, and here's why. In the beginning of the movie, of the story of A Christmas Carol, two solicitors come asking Scrooge for some charity for other people. And Scrooge very coolly rebuffs them and pretty much says, "Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?" To which the solicitors say with grim in their voices, they say, "Well, I'm sorry to say that they're still in operation." And Scrooge basically says, "Well, if they're still in operation, then they must go there." And the other two gentlemen say, "Well, many people can't go there, and many people would rather die instead of going to the workhouses or the prisons." And Scrooge says, "Well, if they are to die, then they should do so soon and decrease the surplus population." So the river of blood, or the elevator of blood, I think, ties in very neatly again with the attitude of letting poor people just suffer their privations and die. And many people probably did suffer from want and cold and hunger, and many maybe died because of starvation or sickness, illness, or the elements, And so probably thousands upon thousands of people probably did not live out the winter months because of these stingy people in the world. So again, even though some people like to say that elevator of blood represents either the blood lost of the American Indians or the First Nation peoples, or people of the Holocaust, and again, I'm not denying any of those interpretations. So if somebody hears me trying to say that my interpretation is the right and only one, I never said that. I'm not saying that now and would never say that. But I'm just saying that this is another way of looking at, I think, The Shining. But again, I think that elevator of blood, yes, it could be seen as the poor people who also did not receive charity and as a result died of that. And then the last thing I guess I'll say simply is that, again, the character Mr. Halloran, I did not really develop a whole lot around him other than that I think that he kind of, if you superimpose him or join his character to that of Wendy's, they kind of make up the Bob Cratchit character. In other words, the reason why I'm saying it, Halloran is kind of like the Bob Cratchit character in this version of the Christmas Carols, Kubrick's version, is that in the Dickens version, Bob Cratchit, of course, Tiny Tim, Scrooge showers benevolence upon them, and he brings them out of their poverty, and Tiny Tim is healed, and Bob has a new position. He's getting more money, and he's having a good life now. And so Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, brings him up. He helps elevate Bob Cratchit. But in Kubrick's anti-Christmas Carol movie, of course, Bob Cratchit's got to die. And so that's why I think that Halloran also is a stand-in for Bob Cratchit. So, all right, there you have it there, folks, pipe pals and gals. My little entry into my interpretation of the Kubrick's The Shining. And why? I believe in many ways it can be seen as a real Christmas movie. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one coming up real soon. Take care and have a very merry. See ya.